So this is the story of me and the crocodile. So a long time ago, I used to prepare biology 1A labs at UC Berkeley. And those labs would teach biology to some of the students. And all semester long, we'd wait to get to our very favorite lab, which was the last one at the end of the school year. And it was called vertebrate diversity. Now, normally, there would be 2 labs running side by side, each with 28 students. So there would be 56 students at a time in each, divided in half between 2 classrooms. But the vertebrate diversity lab was so big that all the students went to both classrooms, because one classroom was turned into a mammal and bird study room, and the other was turned into a reptile, amphibian, and fish study room. So what I would do in the mornings, my job, one of my main jobs there was taking care of the animals. Turtles are reptiles.
That's my favorite reptile.
I love turtles too. So in the labs, there were a variety of things. Like there were skeletons of animals. There were museum prepared animals. There were museum prepared animals that were in lifelike poses. And then there were also live animals. And some of the live animals lived in the lab. Like we had fish tanks that were always on display so people could look at different fish. What?
Crocodiles.
Nope, not normally. The crocodile, I'll tell you about that one in a second. So the fish were always in the labs. And then I would originally, in the lab I had across the hall where I would prepare the labs, I used to keep a whole bunch of animals. Like I had frogs and geckos, which reminds me to tell you the gecko story again sometime. But then the Office of Lab Animal Care came through and said, you know what? You're taking great care of these animals, but we want all the vertebrates on campus, except for the fish you have, to come live with us. So every semester, I would basically order up my own animals. I would say, I want the White's tree frog, I want the tokay gecko, I want the day gecko. You know, whatever animals we had that belonged to the Bio 1A labs, they would give to us back for the week. But UC Berkeley had a dwarf African crocodile. And this animal belonged to UC Berkeley, but it lived at the Sacramento Zoo. So every semester, they would bring it back to the Sacramento Zoo. Oh, and more importantly, too, we would also get live animals from the Lindsay Wildlife Museum.
I've been to Sacramento, I think.
Has anybody here been to the Lindsay Wildlife Museum before?
No,
So
I don't think so.
you have? So it's a really cool museum because they rehabilitate wildlife that gets injured or sick. But some animals get so sick or so injured they can't be released after they get better. So they would bring us red-tailed hawks, turkey vultures, American kestrels, American crows, sometimes like a little gray fox or a prairie dog would come. And those would all be on display for the students. So in the morning, so I would go take care of all these animals, and I would start with the mammals, and I would feed them and water them and clean up all their poop. Then I'd go to the birds, and I'd feed and water them and clean up all their poop. And those birds, especially red-tailed hawks, I would hang sheets on the walls, and every morning they would have pooped like 6 feet up in the air onto the sheets, which is why we had to cover the walls. But I would take those sheets down and put clean sheets up. And all those birds, they weren't allowed to be released, so they all had a tether going from their leg down to a perch for them to stay on. And I would give them some exercise. I would take them off the perch, put them on my glove, and with the tether in between my thumb and my other fingers. And I would run back and forth in the room so they could flap their wings and get a little bit of exercise. So when I was finally, and that always took so long in the morning because the birds made the biggest mess. Then I'd go through the other room and I'd just check in on the reptiles and amphibians and fish that were there. And usually they didn't need any care at all.
Well,
Usually. Which also reminds me to tell you the story. I have my main tokay gecko story someday too. But what? So the problem that happened is the biggest problem, and I'll tell you about it right now. So I got through, and some of you have heard this story before. So I got through almost everything, and I know how much time it takes. So the labs were just about to open, and there were students outside waiting for me. Usually there would be, the door would be open and the students could just come in. But in this case, I was busy taking care of these really special animals, so the doors were locked. So the instructors and the students were all locked out. So I go to I think I'm about to finish cleaning all the animals. I think I'm about to let all the students in when I see some drops of blood upon the floor. And I think, oh no, what is this? And I looked at the little drops of blood, and they led to the dwarf African crocodile cage. And I went to go look in the dwarf African crocodile cage. Was he there? No, he was not. He was not there. And you're right, his name is Kofi, you remember. Kofi the dwarf African crocodile. He was not there. So I think I remember I started sweating in a panic, and I remember opening the door and seeing all these students out there and just telling them, don't come in, and slamming the door again. And I thought, well, where in the world is the crocodile? And the thing is that he was about 3 feet long, I would say.
Like as big as that leopard or tiger shark we saw out of the water?
Yeah, as big as the leopard shark we saw out of the water. About 3 feet long, about that same size. So, and the thing is that he used to weigh probably 45 pounds. He was big and chunky. But then they realized at the Sacramento Zoo that they had been feeding him too much. And they had put him on a diet. So when he came that week, he was lean and mean. And he had gotten out of his cage in the night. So I followed the blood trail, and I discovered he was underneath the students' lab benches behind some of their rolling chairs. And was he happy to see me? No. He got up. He had been sitting on his belly with his forelegs beside him. And he got up and he stretched himself up as high as he could go. Yes? What's your question?
I want to do the hip thing.
Okay.
Did you like from 4 legs and then get up?
Yeah, so he's still on all 4 legs, but he raised his body up as far as he could, just like that.
Like starting like this. No, actually.
Yep,
I
and
wanna
getting
do the hip thing.
just like that.
Like this.
Yep, just like that. As high as he could go.
Next time you tell the story.
Put your mask on and come over.
Next time you tell the story, can I say this part?
Sure. So he raised himself up as high as he could, and he made a very low, very loud, open-mouthed growl. And I went and I looked around, and I was really, really panicked. And I thought, We need an expert in this situation. We need an expert who knows how to put this angry crocodile back into its cage so the students can come in and take their class. And I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, who's the expert?
No.
Who was the expert, you guys?
Yeah.
Me. I was the expert. So I took a deep breath, and I moved the lab chairs out of the way. And he was still raised up on all four legs as high as he could go, and his mouth was still open, and he was still growling at me. Was I happy?
No.
No. Was I scared?
Yes.
Really, really scared.
Why
And I thought,
every time it's no.
so what I did is I know how to pick him up because I would demonstrate it for all the students. They have these special scales on the back of their neck, these 4 little bumps, and I would pick him up with my thumb behind the 4 bumps and the rest of my hand under his neck and my arm across his body, under and between his legs. And I thought, you know what? He's gonna bite me, scratch me, and or whip me with his tail. Did I want any of those things to happen?
Which one do you
No.
think is the worst?
There was only one outcome, and the only one outcome was to get him back in his cage.
Which one do you think is the worst?
What?
Bite, scratch, or tail? I think bite.
I think biting would be the worst, because crocodiles, when they bite, they turn. And so he could really hurt me. So,
And which one do you think will hurt least?
I'm
Tail
gonna go with scratching would hurt the least.
whip. I'm gonna go with tail whip.
You think the tail whip? Okay. So, and I knew, here, turn this way. So I knew I only had one chance to fix the situation. And I was gonna have to move faster than a crocodile. So I sat there and I breathed a couple deep
Do
breaths.
crocodiles even move fast?
Crocodiles can move fast.
Can I go down? Do they move faster than hippos?
I don't know if crocodiles move faster than hippos. That's a good question. You'll see us. You'll see. Just wait right there. Just wait there. You'll see from there. So there goes that helicopter. So I knew I had to wait and be so careful, and then I was going to have to surprise it. And I was going to have to come, and I picked him up you're so heavy. Okay. Oh, I picked him up as fast as I can, and I ran him over and put him in his cage. Go back and sit down. So I ran and put him in his cage, and I thought, where in the world was all this blood? And the blood was coming from the tip of his toe. We were using some lab shelving to make the cage for him, and there were little holes in it. And so when he was trying to get out, he stuck one of his toes into the tiny hole, bent it up, and broke his claw off and got out of the cage.
That blood was coming out.
Yep.
Where his nail was supposed to be.
Yep, so blood was coming out from where his nail was supposed to be.
So back here, like.
Yep, kind of like if you had one of your toenails removed, it would bleed too.
One.
Yeah.
I had blood out of my toenail before.
Yep. So, we put him back, and he was just fine. I don't remember seeing
What is this loop?
I don't remember seeing where his claw ended up going, but sure enough, the students were able to come in. My lab coat had some splotches of blood on it. The crocodile was just fine. Then the Daily Cal came.
The broken cage.
Then the Daily Cal came, and they said, we're here to take pictures of you with all these animals. So there I was with some blood on my lab coat, and I did a demonstration, the same demonstration I always did for the students. I would pick that crocodile up that same way, and I would let the students touch the top of the crocodile and the bottom of the crocodile.
And
And I would keep it safe the way I was holding it so that the students and the crocodile and I would be safe.
And then you sing it.
And then what?
Then you're saying it.
Yep. And then we ended up, and then at the end of the week, we take the crocodile back to the Sacramento Zoo, which is really fun to have a dog kennel with a crocodile in the back of a van driving to the zoo, which is fabulous, I think. And then we had to end up making a new cage for it. So we made a plexiglass cage with a top that came over the top. So if it managed to climb up a little bit, it would have an overhang that it couldn't get its body past. So that's what we did. What?
Only the head?
Yeah, well, it would go head first to climb over, and it wouldn't be able to do that from that position. So that, my friends, is the end of the story of Heather and the crocodile.